It's a tough job to raise kids in our society today. Drugs and alcohol are everywhere. Students are bringing weapons to school. All the while, legislators are trying to repair an education system that isn't working well. And while the government may mean well, many parents are beginning to feel like they're losing their right to raise and influence their own children. In fact, in a recent nationwide poll by the Luntz Research Company, 75% of the respondents said they would support an amendment to their state constitution which would protect their parental rights. Joining me now to explain why parents are feeling a need to protect their rights is Greg Erkin, Executive Director for Of the People. Welcome to American Family, Greg.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you here. And this is a subject that I guess is beginning to get a lot more discussion around the country.
That's correct. It's definitely an issue that's bubbling up from the grassroots.
What's making it bubble up?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head just a moment ago when you talked about public education. When you talk about parental rights, that's really the meat and potatoes of this issue. And I think that there's a growing consensus that all of the problems associated with particularly public education can be summarized as a lack of accountability to parents, who, after all, are the true owners of the school.
Well, I know that this has been a growing issue for a long time. I can recall that when my own children were in school, that when they finally reached a certain age, the school told them, you don't have to have your parents' permission anymore to be absent. But yet if the student missed school, they'd call us and say, where is that person? We're tempted to say, what's it to you? I mean, you told them they didn't have to pay attention to us on being absent. So certainly that's a growing feeling that the schools are working against the parents.
That's right.
We want to find out specifically what's in the proposed amendment, and there are two specific provisions which protect parents in this amendment, so let's read them for our viewers. The Parents' Rights Amendment says, the right of parents to direct the upbringing and education of their children shall not be infringed, and the legislature shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. Now that seems fairly innocuous. Is it being well received?
It certainly is being very well received with parents, but you'd be amazed to find the reaction that this simple statement of common sense principle does get from certain corners.
Well, who's opposed to it?
Well, I think that there's some folks who have a direct vested interest in not returning this kind of authority to parents. Certain parts of the education establishment.
Are you talking about the teachers' union?
Yes, in certain segments. That's right.
But is there a distinction here between the teachers' union officials and the majority of teachers?
I think there very well could be. I think there could be. We have to avoid painting with a broad brush. And I've heard from a number of individual teachers that believe that this is exactly the principle upon which all education reform ought to be built.
Right. What has brought about the need for this? Give me some specific examples.
Okay. Some of the hot button issues are like condom distribution in public schools without parental approval, certain kinds of sex education which may, to the extent that it has a values component, might contradict values being taught at home, the movement to enact public and private school choice. All of these issues touch on parental rights.
Okay, we're going to give our viewers a chance to get in on this. If you have a question about your rights as a parent or about the Parental Rights Amendment, give us a call at 1-800-5000-NET. Well now, all right, so you talked about sex education, and I guess any time that a parent raises an objection, for instance, we have seen cases where parents raised objections about books that their kids were assigned to read that perhaps were unduly vulgar. And the parent would raise an objection, and all of a sudden what happens is the school authorities start accusing these parents of being radicals or part of the religious right or censors. Does all this enter into the equation?
It does. It's, as you say, it so often quickly descends into name-calling, basically. And what we are attempting to do, and I think we're having success with the Parental Rights Amendment, is to raise the debate to the level of common sense and to say, regardless of the content, say, of a particular curricula that parents might be concerned with, the real question is who decides what's in the best interests of the children. Is it going to be parents or some agent of the government.
But now you can't have curricula decided by each parent.
Oh, that's right. There's going to have to be some room for reasonable compromise, as there is in every public policy area. But we think that right now the balance is way on the side of individuals making these choices who are not the parents of the children. We think we need to swing the pendulum back much closer to parental decisions at the local level.
What response have you gotten from school officials, principals, and school boards?
Well, we've had some opposition from some school board associations in some states like North Dakota and Colorado, I believe. They raised some objections that, for example, they say the wording is too broad-based or something like that. And we never meant for the amendment to answer every specific policy question that arises. That's not what constitutional amendments are for. They are to provide a starting place for the debate. And right now, the parental rights debate is sort of all over the map, and we need to lay down this statement.
Did those objecting states offer any substitute?
Well, no, they didn't. None that I'm aware of. I think that some felt perhaps discrete issues could be addressed through statutory reforms or whatnot. But our position is that the violation of parental rights on the federal and local level is a systemic problem that deserves a systemic solution, that is a return to codifying the rights of parents at the constitutional level.
Well, certainly the argument becomes all the more explosive when you have schools taking the position that they can tell girls, for instance, they can assist them in getting abortions without ever telling the parents, but yet these same girls have to get parental permission to get their ears pierced.
That's right.
And so parents get very uptight when the school begins to assert authority in place of the parent.
That's right. And as you mentioned earlier, the parent is the first person called should this abortion go wrong for the minor girl involved. They have to take full responsibility for that and other medical treatment.
They probably have to pay the medical bills too.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. And to lock them out of the decision-making process beforehand.
Yeah. Well, now, what is happening with this proposed amendment? Is it being introduced across the country, or what's happening?
Yes, it is. As I said, we're trying to amend state constitutions first, and
state constitution.
That's right. Eventually, the federal constitution, and we have sponsors for the amendment in 27 state legislatures. In fact, I just confirmed that the bill is being introduced today in Iowa, and we hope in 1996 to initiate at least one petition drive as well to place this language directly on state ballots.
Now, you've only been doing this for a year, right?
That's right. That's
so
right.
This is your first year at doing it, and you've got 27 states where at least one person in the legislature supports it strongly enough to put in a bill.
That's exactly right.
Have any of them made their way through the process?
We've had 2 floor votes thus far. We were very pleased that it could go that far in such a short time, in Kansas and North Dakota. Now, it didn't pass in those states, but it did garner a very sizable number of votes.
Quite often something that's as revolutionary as this, although it shouldn't be revolutionary, but it is, requires a long period of time to get the public acclimated to the idea. Is it catching on in the public?
I think it is. I think we're moving from a base of parents and other activists who instinctively understand the idea to reaching out to a lot of parents who may not be so concerned with the values taught at school, but are simply trying to raise the academic standards, and they too understand the appeal of the amendment.
Well, the whole matter of academic standards, I know in Virginia, where we've got a battle going on right now about proposed new standards by the governor versus the establishment wanting to keep it as it is, that's completely, or can be completely, aside from the traditional explosive issues of abortion and sex ed and those kinds of things.
That's exactly right.
Are you finding that to be the case in other states?
Yes, and I think that our job is to, in the public's mind, to link these issues, that what they have in common is that we need to restore accountability to parents, regardless of the reason they're concerned about public education.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to be right back with more on the movement to protect parents' rights after these messages. We're back with Greg Erkin of The People, talking about parents' rights and their rights of raising their children as they see fit. And if you have a question for him or a comment, you can call us now at 1-800-5000-NET. Now, Greg, we made reference earlier to a survey that was done by the Lutz Research Corporation. What was the basic thrust of that survey?
Well, it asked two very simple questions for us. One specifically on the Parental Rights Amendment. Just said, would you support an amendment to your state constitution that said the right of parents to direct the upbringing and education of their children shall not be infringed? And the results surprised even us. 74% of a representative sample expressed support, including 58% of self-described liberal Democrats.
Say that again now?
58% of self-described liberal Democrats supported the Parental Rights Amendment.
Right?
That's right. And support across all other lines of age, gender.
So this was a genuinely scientifically conducted poll.
That's right.
So it covered all ages, all ethnic backgrounds, all philosophies.
That's exactly right.
And you still got that kind of a response. What else did you learn from the survey?
Well, they asked another question, which was even more broad. It said, who do you feel should make the basic decisions about children's upbringing and education, parents or the government? 94% chose parents. 3% chose government.
Well, now, I thought that this matter of parental rights was a radical right endeavor here.
Oh, yes, it's radical, right up there with common sense notions like balancing the budget.
That's
or
right.
Something like that. It's sometimes we say that it's a shame almost that we've come to the point where we need to put parental rights into law. It's one of those self-evident truths, you might say, that maybe is no longer so self-evident.
Well, now, I would expect that there are going to be viewers out there who say, that sounds interesting to me, but I don't know much about it. If they contact us here at NET, are there materials that we can make available to them through you?
Absolutely. We're active in all 50 states, and as I said earlier, the amendment is now introduced in over half of the state legislatures, and if they were to contact their state representative or senator, chances are the bill would already be in the hopper.
Well, now, your group is called Of the People. What else do you do?
Well, right now, being such a young organization, being only about 2 years old, we're focusing exclusively on enacting the Parental Rights Amendment. But as our name might indicate, we're really animated by a spirit of populism, returning government to the people. And parental rights is just a concrete manifestation of that.
I see. And how'd you happen to focus on that item?
Well, our chairman and founder, Jeff Bell, and his colleagues really were taken aback by the uprising in New York City in 1992 when this multiracial coalition of parents rejected some pretty explicit rainbow curriculum in the public schools there and ended up throwing the public school chancellor out of office. Now, this was not a radical right-wing movement. These people are not even self-described Republicans or conservatives, but when it comes to their children, they know what's best. And it was clear that there was a real movement that folks in Washington had not yet tapped into.
Okay, we're going to go to the phones here. We've got Wilton in Springfield, Virginia. What is your question for Greg?
Well, my question or comment is the fact that with respect to parents forfeiting, I think the parents, to a large degree, including myself when I was raising children, forfeited the right to raise the children to a limited extent that we allowed the politically correct groups to take over the PTA organizations and so forth, and thinking that these different school groups and PTAs and so forth would do a thorough job of raising those children and cultivating them and so forth. And I think we're finding out that they weren't doing that, that there's a certain type of person who runs to those groups and gains control of them and raises the standards to suit themselves. And I think that all the parents have to get active in those things and make sure that they're not dominated by, as I say, the politically correct
Wilton has raised a very good point because usually when, especially a parent for the first time, their child is in school and they feel somewhat obliged, or an opportunity. Oh, now I'm qualified, I can join the PTA, and this is going to be good for the kids. What has been your experience about the role of PTAs?
Well, it's quite natural for a parent to think that the PTA is there for what its avowed purpose is, to get parents involved in public schools. What parents are telling us daily is that the PTA does not serve that function. for them. They're looking for alternative ways to make sure that their rights are respected, to get involved in public schools. And they're turning to initiatives like the Parental Rights Amendment to make that happen.
Well, I have noticed over the years, as various issues come up, that it just seems like invariably that the PTA is on the other side from the position I would take, at least. And it never dawned, well, it didn't dawn me for a long time, that what Wilton just said was happening, and that is that the school officials take a look at the group of people in the PTA and they begin to cultivate certain ones who reflect the viewpoint they want reflected, and then these people rise through the system and they control the PTA system, and it's not at all student-oriented.
That's right, or parent-oriented, despite its name. Just as we have teachers who are turning away from the NEA to look for an alternative teacher organization because it doesn't represent their views, we have parents now looking for other alternatives to represent them.
That was a very good observation by Wilton.
Yes.
Now, what are some of the practical things that people can do in their own communities if they find that this is a cause they want to get involved in?
Well, first of all, as I mentioned, call your state representative or senator to see if the amendment has been introduced in your state.
Right.
If not, see if they'd consider carrying the bill in their state. Secondly, particularly if it is introduced, share some information from other people with some other activists, some pro-family groups or whatnot in your state. We're getting terrific support from a lot of grassroots organizations who are working on these
What about
kinds of
things
issues.
like just plain letters to the editor and,
Absolutely.
Commentaries that they write for their weekly paper? Or
Absolutely. No one is more eloquent for parental rights than parents. And bringing anecdotal stories about their, say, their frustrations with the public school bureaucracy or whatnot to the attention is very powerful.
And it would seem to me that someone who wants to get involved in this could go back through their papers and find out when there have been stories that involved parental rights in the past, and they could go and draw on a natural cadre of people to get involved.
That's right. It's an extremely broad-based movement that's forming. We've talked mostly of public school parents, but parents whose children are in private schools or in homeschooling, which is on the rise, also have an obvious interest in the issue of parental rights.
Well, certainly it is a political fact that nobody is more motivated than someone whose ox has been gored and someone who has been offended by the system. In fact, that's how I got involved in politics to get started. But it would seem to me that when people have been involved, like the case we talked about earlier in the show, about the Bible club that wanted to do something and they wouldn't let them, and I imagine that drew a lot of people together to become active.
Absolutely. The story making the rounds in Washington, as you know, is Sonny Bono's story of how he got involved in politics. He tried to open up a small business, ran into red tape, and now he's a congressman from Washington.
So I'll become the mayor, I'll fix that red tape. Well, I understand those stories. Well, very good. Well, we appreciate you being here to fill us in on the latest developments of the people and the amendment as you're working it across the country, and we'll want to stay tuned and get the continuing updates.
We'll keep you posted.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. If you'd like to contact Of the People for more information about Parents' Rights Amendment, give us a call here at NET and we'll give you the number, and that way you can get involved. Now, Betsy, what's happening on the Foster nomination?